Chris Symes is a British producer. To be more precise, he's a line producer. I met him in 2014 while working on the TV series Black Sails in South Africa. His credits include Resident Evil, Hellboy, Alien vs. Predator, Aragon, and many more. Working as a producer is a hard work, challenging and rewarding. In his interview, Chris shares with us his experience of over 30 years in the film industry. His best skill to me? His talent for balancing the two very souls of filmmaking, organizational and budgetary restraints, and the creative flair that sparked the story in the first place. First of all, I want to thank you, Chris, for being here and accepting my invitation. I'm very honored and happy to be able to speak with you again.
I'm very flattered. Anybody will find me interesting at all. So anyway, but
I find you very interesting. Yes.
You're very welcome.
And I also have a lot of, much admiration for what you do, because I have been there and we met at the Black Sails production at the Cape Town Film Studios. And oh my God, I thought if I do like just a little production work, I don't know how he manages to be an executive producer. And so for me, it was fantastic. And I always admired your work.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's one of the great experiences of my life, that show. So, yeah.
Great. Yeah. So it was for me. So I'm glad that we share that experience.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And you've been in the industry for how many years now?
Well, I left art school in 1985. And then I think I probably got my first job, later that year. So what's that? 85, 95, 2005.
We can say 4 decades.
30 something years now, yeah.
Wow, fantastic. And when did you know that you wanted to work in the film industry?
Well, I started my training as an art student. I mean, all the time I was growing up, I just wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be a painter. And so I went to art school and I was a painting student. And it slowly dawned on me that this was a very solitary experience. And so I started making little films, and making little films mean that you have to work with other people. And that's what I loved. I really enjoyed the collaborative, creative process with other people. And as soon as I did that, I realized that maybe I didn't want to be a painter anymore. And actually what I wanted to be was a filmmaker and to join the film industry. So I think it was probably early. It was when I was an art student, or just coming to the end of being an art student. So that was around 1985.
Okay. So you didn't really study to become a producer, if I understand correctly, because art school is more generic, I believe.
I did not study filmmaking at all. Everything I know about filmmaking, I've learned by working in the industry and doing it and learning on the job. So it's, I had no formal training whatsoever, which of course is different for everybody. There are film schools which are wonderful, wonderful places where you learn about, the skills of creative filmmaking, but that's not what I did.
The hardest thing, I guess, is to get the first job. How did you get your first job as a producer? You were saying I made a film. And did you just take a camera and collected a couple of friends and started making a movie, or how did that go?
Well, it took me quite some time to be a film producer, because I left art school having made a few little films with my friends as a director and a producer and a prop man and everything. And then I had to find my way in the world. And I started literally just as a runner. I started making the tea. I started at the very bottom, took every opportunity I could, worked very hard, and slowly just managed to work up from being a runner, making the tea, to slightly more responsibility, slightly in the production office, until one day I was working in a company, and there were two directors who were a directing duo, and they needed a producer, and they were doing their first music video. We just looked at each other and said, okay, let's do it. And I said, I'll be your producer. and it was nothing more planned than that. I've never really had a plan. It's just seizing the opportunities when they present themselves, I think, is the way I've done it.
That's very good. Yeah, as one door opens and you open it, and then other things unfolds. Do you believe there are a set of skills that you need to have in order to be a good producer? I'm thinking about hard skills, but also soft skills.
I think it's important to distinguish between the different kinds of producers there are. When you watch films these days, there seem to be so many producers, and they all do a different job. I am a line producer. Well, I'm what's known as a line producer. So I am the nuts and bolts guy. The best way of describing it is, if you give me the script and you give me the money, I will give you back the film. But I'm not a producer who goes out and raises finance. I'm not necessarily what you would call a creative producer. I'm the guy who, like I say, if you give me the finished script and you give me the money to make it, I will give you back the film. So that's hiring people, building the kind of machine, if you like, that is able to then turn this script into a finished film. It's an interesting question, because I think it comes to, what does it take to be a good producer, and certainly a good line producer. Probably one of the most important things is to listen. It's to grow to understand what all the departments do, grow to understand what they need, grow to understand what stress they're under, and being sympathetic to their needs. Because what I'm always amazed by with film crews is the dedication that they bring to making a film. Because I think that when you're the kind of producer that I am, who has to make a film for a fixed amount of money, then telling people that they can't have things, or it's not possible, and saying no is very much part of the role of being a producer. So I think the soft skills really are how you do that.
Right, because you need to know how to say no.
You need to know how to say no. You need to understand why it is they're asking for these things. You need to understand that they're not magicians. They can't just magic things out of thin air, that almost everything costs money. And equally, they need to understand that sometimes there is just not enough money to do it. So it has, rather than it be a mandate, it has to be a dialogue. You have to be fair, you have to be reasonable, and you have to be understanding. Part of that, I think, is kind of accepting what the creative process actually is. And I say this very often, which is, making a film, we're not making cars, we're not making washing machines, we're not making these kind of objects where you know exactly what it is that you're making from the very beginning. You have a blueprint and then you manufacture it. But what we're doing is making something much more elusive, and something that will change as in the process of actually making it. So I think having that kind of open-mindedness, that sympathetic approach to all the people who are just doing their best and working really, really hard to realize this thing, which is really kind of getting away from you sometimes, that you don't really know what it is before you've started making it. It's a very important thing to have a dialogue with them. And I think so much of what a producer does are those soft skills, those people skills, those, and really hard skills, I think, are really, from a producing point of view, really the tools of your trade are a telephone and a computer. So your hard skills you don't really have any. They're all soft skills, in my opinion.
Yeah, it seems so. I mean, you do need to be well organized and having. I don't know if you need to like numbers, because you deal a lot with budget, right? Is it something that would say, you would say it will definitely help you in your career as a producer.
To some extent. I mean, what I think you have to recognize is that you have this fantastic team around you who are all experts in what they do. And producers are, the expression we use, a jack of all trades. You know enough about everything, but not an awful lot about any one thing. So when it comes to numbers, you will have a production accountant who all they do is manage the budget and make sure that it's all staying on budget. It helps if you're relatively good at numbers, for sure, but I would never say that I'm an expert in numbers. I'm not an expert in anything. I know a little bit about lots of things.
You were talking about being a line producer. Now, when I look at your bio on IMDb, and you have a pretty long one, you have been a line producer, executive producer, supervising producer, and co-producer. So, like in very, a few words, what would you say is the main difference between these four titles?
For me personally, none. They are all just different names for what I do. And for many years, line producer was not really a technical credit. I mean, really what you're talking about is the credit you see on the finished film, when it says my name.
Correct, yeah.
There are all sorts of reasons why you will be called something different on every film. But essentially, if you want to categorize me, all of those titles, I am a line producer. I am doing the same job.
How does your day start? Like a normal day as a producer, what does it look like?
I think when you're in production, there are three phases of production. So there's pre-production, production, which is really the shooting the film or the television series. And then there's post-production, which is editing it all together and finishing it and delivering it. I have done post-production, but I don't usually do post-production. What I normally do is I get hired at the very, very beginning of the project, and we start initial prep, pre-production, and then we go into full pre-production and then the shoot. My day is in pre-production is as busy as it is on the shooting day, but it is a different day. In prep, you start 7:30 in the morning, and you're just basically prepping. You're building the show. You're hiring everybody. You're looking at building sets. I mean, I'm not obviously, but you're you're supervising the machine which makes all of this possible. When you start shooting, then you have a shooting day which can start at any time depending on the scene. Obviously, if it's a night scene, then you start later. But I am always there at what they call call time, and I am there until everybody goes home. So, and I will be prepping for the days which are coming up, and I will visit the set, the actual shooting set where the actors are and the director is and everybody is, the cameras are. I will check in with them on 3 or 4 times a day, just to see it's all going okay. And then I will leave and I will go back to the office or wherever to start setting up the following days and following weeks. So it's a long day. It's always a 12, 14, 16-hour day, either in prep or in shoot for producers usually, especially if you're working for Los Angeles, because obviously the time difference makes a big difference.
Yes, exactly. Like tonight, you were mentioning to me there were like 3 continents on a call later tonight.
Yeah.
So it can be quite tiring, I imagine, and I know because on my side of things, production was also quite compelling. So, what would you say is the easiest part of the job for you?
It's not necessarily the easiest part. What I'm going to do is tell you what I think the most enjoyable part is, which is kind of related to the easiest part. And I think from a personal level, I think the most enjoyable part is traveling the world, going to work in places I never thought I would go, having really the opportunity to meet so many new people. I mean, that is one of the great joys of this job, I think, which is that the opportunity to every show is different. Every show is new. I mean, sometimes on television, you go back and you work on a second season or third season with people who you know, and you find that you have friends, good friends all over the world, like you and I, you know. And for me, that's one of the most enjoyable parts of this job. And I also think, you know, one of the things that sticks out to me is having the opportunity to actually tell people that they are brilliant, that they are doing a fantastic job, that they are world-class filmmakers. That's the easiest part of the job because it's true. And it's also one of the most enjoyable parts of the job.
And how about the hardest part or less enjoyable?
For me personally, and it's different for everybody, all producers, I guess, for me, the hardest part is the stress of somebody getting hurt on a film. And what I do is I seem to do lots of action shows. So there's always fighting or explosions or, you know, this sort of stuff involving lots of stuntmen and women and lots of risk. That for me is where I lose sleep. That's the hardest thing is to make sure that the shooting of those sequences is so well planned that you limit the chances of anything going wrong as much as you possibly can. But I also know that you can't predict absolutely everything in these sequences, in big explosions or so. It's that bit that you can't plan for. That's the stressful bit for me. That's the hardest part. And also, I think it's working. You know, I mean, like I said, when you make a film, you're not making a car or a washing machine. You don't know necessarily what it is you're making. So I think one of the hardest things is working without a crystal ball. You don't know what's around the corner. You don't know where this thing will end up and how the day will pan out. So that's difficult, but it's not the most stressful because that's what experience tells you how to cope with, I think.
Can you share a moment of failure during your career? Because of course your career has been paved with a lot of very successful moments and a lot of satisfactions. But in order to put also, you know, like a balance or the weight to this profession, which is a hard profession, it's a difficult one to achieve. Would you have a moment of failure that you would like to share with us?
Look, I mean, there's so many moments of failure. I mean, I think that one of the things about this job is being a producer, and certainly a line producer, is that to a large extent, you have to be a little bit of a control freak, because what you're trying to do is control something that doesn't really want to be controlled. And so the failure is a constant companion, I think. And, you know, yes, I've had a stuntman hurt, and, you know, that's a very bad day. Not seriously, but even not seriously was a very bad day, because you think, what could we have done to avoid that accident? And actually, not much, but it still hurts, and you still take responsibility for it, and it's difficult. But what I would say is that, given that small failures, hopefully small failures, but, you know, small failures happen on a very regular basis, whether they're errors of judgment or you just got that, you know, called it wrong or whatever, that the one thing I think you can't learn at college, at film school, and you can't buy, is just the experience of doing it. The many, many years of experience of having seen so many problems that you have to overcome in the past means that you are better equipped when problems come up in the future. You know, you haven't seen exactly this problem before because every film is different, with different people and different scripts and different everything, but you've seen something like it. and you know how to go about solving that problem or avoiding that problem. So I certainly think that that's the bit that you can't learn in theory and you can't buy, you have to do. And that can be a painful experience. I've finally learned how to be a good producer, but it's taken me many years.
We're talking about 30 plus years
of, yes,
in the making.
Let's not talk too much about how many years it is.
And so in all those years, for sure there have been like very memorable moments. Can you remember one in particular? It's going to be very hard because you've been in so many productions, and I'm sure the moments that you've shared, like happy moments and memorable ones, have been many. But do you have one that you have fond memories of?
There are many. Some of them are silly. Like one day we stopped filming in Cape Town, and I said, "Why we stopped filming?" And they said, "That's because there's a cobra on the set." And it's like, okay, all right, I'll always remember that. And but actually, one that I did want to tell you about was Black Sails. We were shooting Black Sails in Cape Town. And we had come almost to the end of the 4th season, and we knew that the 4th season was the end of it. There was no more story. We would not come back for another season. And a carpenter walked across to see me, and he said to me, "Are you coming back for another season?" And I said, No, I have to tell you that we're not. I'm really sorry. And he said, that's fine. But I just want to thank you for bringing Black Sails to Cape Town, because I have now had employment for 4 years and I now have things I never thought I would have. And I said, that's fantastic. What do you have that you never thought you would have? And he said, a car and a wife. And that I will remember forever.
Oh, really?
Because, I think that at the end of the day, there is the glamorous side of this. There is the premieres, but actually what is so important to realize is that these are people's jobs. These are people's lives. These are, and sometimes when you go to places, especially not the main filmmaking centers, but when that actually you bring a lot of good, you bring employment. And the other one I'll very quickly say was that when we started in Cape Town, we needed a costume department that was making costumes. And we found a whole bunch of women who were working in a factory making jeans and T-shirts, I think. And that was their skill, jeans and T-shirts. And by the end of the 4 years, they were making 18th century fine costumes. And that's, when you can leave, when a show comes to an end and you can leave such a wonderful legacy as those things, then I think that makes me very happy.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I agree with you. Thank you for that. And so what would you recommend to someone who wants to be a producer and has not done it yet and is really keen, loves the film industry, but doesn't know where to start? What would you recommend?
I think there are many ways of doing this, and I think it does a little bit depend on what kind of producer you want to be. I think there are film schools which are fantastic at teaching you what being a producer is and what a producer does. But what I would also say, and I think I've said this already in chatting to you, is that there are certain parts of being a producer which you cannot learn at film school. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I think to want to go straight in as a producer is fine, but there is also a value in starting on the bottom rungs of the ladder and working your way up. Because part of what that does, I think, is teaches you what everybody does and as I said, all the stresses that these different departments are under. You actually have the opportunity to go and try, work in lots of little different departments. Even if you're trying to end up being a producer yourself, to go and work in the props department, to go and work in set deck, the set dressing, or camera or whatever. You kind of see it from the inside. And I think that's really important, especially if you want to be a line producer, then to have, and lots of line producers come work their way up from, say, locations or, through the production office. So you kind of, become a line producer slowly. And I think that's a good way of doing that. If you want to be a creative producer and you have a script, then off you go. You just have to sell that script, and you have to figure out ways to get that script made, for somebody to give you the enormous amount of money needed to make it, relatively enormous amount of money to make it, even a small film. And, so that's a different kind of producer to me.
Would you be able to share with us like a myth of your job?
Well, I think that, one of the myths is that when you say you work, I mean, I don't think I ever say this, but if people think you work for Hollywood, then it's show business. It's Hollywood. It's super glamorous, and the truth is, it can be. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it can be really, really glamorous, and but those times, in my experience anyway, are a tiny percentage of what it truly is, which is really hard work, long hours, giving up your life. When you're on a production, when you're in production on a show, the show owns you. I mean, I don't mean that in a literal sense, but really, it's all you do. So you give up your friends. You tell them, "I'll see you in a year." And they all know that that's fine, because that's the life you have. So there are many sacrifices which you make to be part of this industry and to be a film producer. And so the glamorous myth, it's not entirely a myth, because there are times when you just go, "Wow, this is fabulous." I'm, whether it's at the Emmys or whatever, but the reality is that this is it's very hard work. Anybody who wants more of a work-life balance, then maybe film production is not for you.
It's a very good advice. Well, on this note, I really want to thank you for taking the time and squeezing your busy schedule to fit our chat. I really hope that we'll have other opportunities in the future. I know that you have quite a long meeting coming up, and the day is still long for you, although it's already 7 p.m. in the UK.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chris. And it makes me miss the times on set and the production office when you were coming to cheer us up and to tell us that we were the unsung heroes of a production.
Yeah. That's right.
I still remember the line fondly. And it's so true.
It is so true. It is so true. Everybody thinks that the set and the actors and the directors, that's where it all happens. But actually, without the machine that keeps it all going, which is the production office where we were working, it doesn't happen at all.
Solving problems every day, and being there for everybody. And so, and I really wish you all the best for the next production, and see you very soon, I hope.
Very good. Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much. Do you want to inspire others and share your professional experience? Do you want to know about a specific profession? Do you have questions you would like to have answered about your favorite job profile? Then write me at jobtalespodcast@gmail.com. See you soon.